I said there's no food for you. The entire business class cabin of Flight 214 fell silent. The boy in seat 14B was 12 years old. The voice belonged to Sandra Whitfield, senior flight attendant, 17 years on the job. And right now, she was standing over row 14 like she owned the sky itself. The boy in seat 14B was 12 years old. His name was Elias Carter. He sat with his spine straight, hands folded in his lap, dressed in a navy blue polo and pressed khakis. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a scene. He had simply looked up at the meal cart and asked, politely, for the pasta. Sandra had looked at him the way some people look at something they don't want to touch. That meal is for business class upgrades only, she said flatly. Marcus glanced at his boarding pass. Seat 14B. Business class. I have a business class seat, he said quietly. I know what seat you have, Sandra snapped. This cart isn't for you right now. Come back later. She pushed the cart forward without another word. The man in seat 14A watched all of this without moving. He was dressed simply, dark slacks, a white shirt, no tie, no jewelry. He had a calm face. The kind of calm that isn't natural. The kind that's been trained. His name was Elias Carter, Marcus's father. He said nothing yet. He just watched Sandra walk away. And something shifted behind his eyes. Have you ever watched someone be treated unfairly in public and nobody said a word? What did you do? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe that dignity should never be determined by what someone looks like, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. Because on this channel, justice always gets the last word. 20 minutes passed. The cart came back around. Sandra was all smiles now, laughing with the couple in row 12, refilling wine for the man in 13C. Marcus raised his hand. Sandra looked at him, then through him. She kept moving. Elias leaned forward. Excuse me. Sandra slowed. Sir, my son asked for a meal. Twice now. He has a business class seat. I'd like to understand why he's being skipped. Sandra's smile didn't disappear, it changed. It became the smile people, where, when they've decided, they don't owe you an explanation. Sir, I already told your son. The cart rotation for this section has a specific order. That's not what you told him, Elias said. His voice was even, quiet, but it cut. You told him the cart wasn't for him. I don't think I need to be accused of anything. No one accused you of anything. I asked a question. Sandra set her jaw. The couple in row 12 were watching now. The man in 13C had put down his wine. If you have a complaint, Sandra said, loudly enough for the row to hear, I can bring you a comment card. But I will not stand here and be spoken to like this. Like what? Elias asked. The question hung in the air. Sandra grabbed the cart and moved. Fast. Elias sat back. He looked at Marcus. Marcus stared at the seat pocket in front of him, jaw tight, trying very hard to be the kind of person his father had raised him to be. She's not going to give it to me, Marcus said softly. No, Elias said. She's not. He reached into the overhead bin and handed Marcus a granola bar from his bag. Marcus took it. Didn't open it. Just held it. The meal cart had barely reached the back galley when Sandra returned. This time she brought Derek, the lead cabin supervisor, a heavy-set man in a pressed vest who walked like someone who had been told he had authority and had fully believed it. Sir, Derek said, stopping at row 14. I've been informed there's been a disturbance. Elias looked up. A disturbance. A confrontation with crew. We take that seriously on this aircraft. I asked why my son was skipped on the meal service. That's the disturbance. The way it was asked. Derek. Elias said the name like he'd read it off the vest. My son is 12 years old. He is seated in business class. He asked for the pasta. He was told the cart wasn't for him. What would you like me to do with that? Derek glanced at Sandra. Sandra stood with her arms crossed. I can move you both to row 22, Derek offered. More space back there. We have business class seats. Silence. If this continues, Derek said, dropping his voice to a warning tone, I am within my rights to notify the captain and request a review of your conduct. That could mean removal from the flight upon landing and a formal complaint filed with the airline. Elias looked at him for a long moment. File whatever you'd like, he said. We'll stay in our seats. Something changed after that. Elias Carter stopped talking. He reached into his carry-on, pulled out a phone. Not to scroll, not to call, not yet. He opened an email thread and read it quietly. His expression never changed, but his thumb hovered over one name in that thread, a name that, on this particular Tuesday, was one call away. Marcus watched his father. He had seen that stillness before. It wasn't the stillness of a man giving up. It was the stillness of a man who already knew how the story ended. Sandra was not done. She moved through the cabin with renewed confidence, stopping to whisper to two passengers in rows 11 and 12. Whatever she said, one of them nodded. Within minutes, a woman from 11C appeared at the end of the row. Excuse me, she said. Her tone was clipped. I want you to know I witnessed the whole thing. You were incredibly rude to this crew member. I'm recording this, and I plan to post it. Elias looked up from his phone. You can record whatever you'd like. People like you always think you can just make a scene. Ma'am. Elias's voice didn't rise. It dropped. Sit down. Something in his tone made her stop. She looked at him, really looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face made her take a step back. She returned to her seat without another word. Marcus glanced at his father. Elias was already looking back at his phone, still, calm, like a man reading the last page of a book he'd already finished. The cockpit door opened. Captain Brannigan walked out. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered, uniform crisp. The kind of man who fills a room without trying. He scanned the cabin once and moved toward row 14 with the measured pace of someone who has been summoned and expects results. Sandra followed 3 steps behind. Derek flanked them. 3 of them. Standing in the aisle. Sir, the captain said, I understand there's been a situation. There has, Elias said. I need to ask you to lower the tension in this cabin for the remainder of this flight. I haven't raised it. The captain squared his stance. With respect, sir, I have 2 crew members who say otherwise. At this altitude, my authority is absolute. If I determine that a passenger is a disruption, I can have local law enforcement meet this aircraft on landing. Elias nodded slowly. Then he looked the captain directly in the eyes. Captain Brannigan, before you make that call, I'd like you to make a different one first. He held up his phone. On the screen was a number. No name. Just an extension. Dial that, Elias said. Tell them Elias Carter is on board and ask them to confirm my standing. The captain frowned. I don't. Please, Elias said. And he said it like a man who has never needed to say please, but chose to, out of patience, not weakness. The captain took the phone. He stepped toward the galley, made the call. He was on it for less than 90 seconds. When he came back, his face was different. He handed the phone to Sandra. You need to take this. Sandra blinked, took the phone, pressed it to her ear. The color left her face. She lowered the phone slowly, looked at Elias Carter, really looked at him, for the first time. Because on the other end of that call was the executive office of Carter Horizon Airlines. The airline whose logo was printed on the tail of this aircraft, whose name was stitched into Sandra's vest, whose CEO held a registered private line that routed to one man, and one man only, Elias Carter. Marcus looked at his father. His father said nothing. He reached over and straightened the collar of Marcus's polo. One small, quiet gesture, like none of this had ever shaken him. Because it hadn't. The silence in that cabin was absolute. The woman from 11C had gone very still. Derek was staring at the carpet. Sandra Whitfield stood with the phone at her side, her mouth open, trying to find a single word, and coming up empty. Captain Brannigan spoke first. "Mr. Carter, I owe you an apology." "You do," Elias said. "But that's not who I need to talk to." He turned to Captain Brannigan. "I want a full incident report filed. Names, times, seat numbers. I want it in my office by end of business tomorrow." The captain nodded. "Yes, sir." He stood, 6 feet, unhurried. He looked at Sandra. Sandra's voice came out in pieces. "Mr. Carter, I had no idea who you are." "I know you didn't," Elias said. "That's exactly the point." He let that sit for a moment. Let the whole cabin hear it. "My son is 12 years old." He said please. He had his boarding pass. He did everything right. And you looked at him and decided the rules didn't apply. Not because of his seat number. Not because of his behavior. He paused. "We both know why." Sandra's eyes went glassy. "I'm not going to raise my voice," Elias continued. "I never was. Because I didn't need to. But I need you to understand something. And I need everyone in this cabin to hear it." He looked around once. Steady. Unhurried. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a sign. It doesn't beg to be seen. That boy sitting next to me, he has more dignity in one hand than most men twice his age. And the moment you decided to test that dignity, you made the worst professional decision of a 17-year career. He picked up his jacket from the overhead bin, folded it once over his arm. "Derek, have the pasta sent to my son, and have HR ready to meet this flight in Atlanta." Derek moved immediately. No hesitation. Elias sat back down, picked up his phone, returned to his email. Marcus watched his father for a long moment. 12 years old. Old enough to understand what had just happened. Old enough to feel the weight of it. "Dad," he said softly. Elias looked over. "Why didn't you just tell her who you were from the beginning?" Elias looked at his son the way a man looks at someone he is handing something irreplaceable. "Because your worth," he said, "has never depended on what I own. It depends on who you are. And you handled yourself with more grace today than most grown men ever will." He tapped Marcus once on the shoulder. Firm. Steady. That's the inheritance that matters. The meal arrived 2 minutes later. Marcus ate. Quietly. Calmly. With his back straight and his hand steady. And the granola bar stayed unopened in his pocket. Not forgotten. Kept. Because someday, when the world tries to tell him he doesn't belong in a room, he will remember the day he sat in that seat and refused to move. There is a kind of power that doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't carry a title on its chest. It doesn't demand your attention or your respect. It simply waits. And when the moment comes, and it always comes, it doesn't explode. It lands. Sandra Whitfield lost her position with Carter Horizon Airlines before the plane landed in Atlanta. Not because Elias Carter was angry, but because dignity matters more than authority. And Marcus Carter would remember that day for the rest of his life. Not the humiliation, the lesson.